All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Robert Vail. I'll be the host today. I am Vice President of Sales here at GENEA. A couple housekeeping items before we get going. Number one, this is a listen-only webinar, so everybody is on mute automatically. But one thing we do recommend and we welcome are actually any questions, either via through the chat or the Q&A part of Zoom. I'd say for those of you who are familiar with Zoom, but we're six months into working from home, so I'm going to assume everybody knows how to use Zoom by now. But feel free to go ahead and do the chat. The other item is we will be recording this webinar as well. So there will be a recording that is sent out as part of our follow-up. And if you have questions that are very specific to myself or to any members of the panel, feel free to ask them. Or if you'd like a one-on-one meeting with anybody in the team just to discuss your buildings, your meters, anything about the company, please feel free to ask. We're more than happy to make ourselves available to you. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So once again, we got a question already. How long is this webinar? Michael, I anticipate going right about 60 minutes. So that's what we've allocated. So, but that's what we anticipate. So we're expecting 60 minutes. All right, thank you. All right, so once again, my name is Robert Vail. Today's topic is automating the way you manage submeter reading and billing. And let's go ahead and get going here. Oh, you know what? I got to record. Excuse me. There we go. So for those of you who are not familiar with GENEA, I'm going to go ahead and start here, and I'm just going to give you some background on our business. So our company, GENEA, we are based here in Southern California. Our cloud-based technology has been around since early 2012, where we started with about 9 million square feet of office on our platform. We've grown pretty dramatically over the last 8.5 years to over 1,500 buildings across the U.S. We also have our services in about 15 different countries. We're in over 250 million square feet of office space. On the submeter billing side, we are reading and billing over 20,000 submeters on a monthly basis. We have a 99% customer retention rate, and this is at the building level. So as we come in and we provide our service to the buildings, we stay with those buildings year over year. And a big reason for that is because of our 24/7 support team. We take customer support very, very seriously. And for those of you who are current customers, you know that our company is a very responsive company. One of the big things and kind of built into the DNA is to take care of our customers to make sure that you're happy and you're always satisfied with our service. You get an idea on the right of some of the companies who we work with across the United States and in the world on the tenant side. But of the top 25 owners of commercial real estate throughout the United States, we work with 21 of them in some type of capacity. What makes us different than any other commercial real estate technology provider are a couple things. One is we are hardware agnostic. So what does that mean? Regardless of which product you're using from us, if it's our overtime HVAC service, we can work with any building automation system. For our submeter billing service, we can work with any type of meter that's out in the marketplace. And obviously, we're going to dig into that as we go through this. And then on the access control side, which is the newest offering from our company, our solution is built upon non-proprietary hardware to make it really easy and flexible for our customers to implement the software solution. We're very big on integrations. We have official partnerships with both Building Engines as well as Angus to help on the billing side to facilitate put billings into the work order systems. And we even have other integrations with camera providers, with identity management systems, so lots of integrations. We never charge any setup fees to implement any of our software solutions. It's always a fixed monthly fee. We want to make sure that our customer doesn't have to spend a lot of capital to implement us. If we required that you had to rip out every single meter that you have and install brand new smart meters, we probably wouldn't be doing as much business as we do. And then once again, the ongoing support, 24/7 support by our employees based between our 3 offices, our Southern California headquarters, our office in Atlanta, and then our Michigan office. So it's our employees handling support for all of our customers 24/7. So we have 3 main solutions. We have our overtime HVAC service, which very high level gives tenants the ability with an app to schedule overtime HVAC whenever they need it. It turns it on, turns it off, and does all the billing at the end of the month. Submeter billing, that's what we're going to spend all of our time focusing on today. And then access control. Like I mentioned before, we acquired a cloud-based access control company in December. It gives you the ability to remotely manage access, physical access in the buildings. I can remotely unlock or lock doors, and I can really manage all the users from anywhere in the world at the time. and it gives a uniform solution for access control. So if anybody's interested in any other solutions, feel free to reach out to our team. We're more than happy to walk you through it. So today's agenda. So we're going to give a general overview of kind of submetering and submeters themselves. We're going to walk through kind of the process of choosing, reading, and installing submeters. We'll talk about billing, because obviously it's one thing to have meters, but then what do you do with that data? How do you bill back for it? How do you bill back accurately? We'll recap with some lessons learned, and then we'll do a brief product demonstration so you can actually see what our service does, and we'll highlight some of the benefits of our solution. So our experts and our team here is a wonderful group of people who I have the pleasure of working with every single day. First, we have Brian Hain, who's head of our technical services team. Brian, how long have you been with GENEA now?
About 12 years.
12 years. And prior to being GENEA, what was kind of, what was your background? How did you get involved with, with GENEA, with metering, with the commercial real estate industry?
So I'm an electrician by trade, high voltage electrician by trade. Fell into the HVAC controls world in the UK. That translated over to Siemens in the US, and then from Siemens through a couple of other controls companies, finally landing at GENEA.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, Brian, for those of you who know, is our in-house metering nerd. Our sales team goes to Brian with all of our questions. Our customers constantly go to Brian and ask him, what's his opinion on this type of meter? How should I implement it? How should I install it? Where should I buy them from? So, so Brian is a very valuable resource for only internally, but for our customers as well. So, so we'll get to Brian's section here in a couple of minutes. Then we have Paul Marcoux, who's our director of submeter billing operations. Paul, how long have you been at GENEA, and how did you get to where you're at now?
I'm going on 8 years with GENEA. So I've actually done a little bit of everything for GENEA, through sales to finance, and more recently taking over the metering business and understanding how to bill back utilities and figuring out that as we move along here.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, Paul's another, for our sales team, another go-to person. A lot of times customers bring us their metering spreadsheets, and we go ask Paul, because he's one of our in-house experts on using anything in Excel. And what does this mean? What do the formulas look like? Are there errors in the spreadsheets? One of the common things we ask Paul about. So he's a great resource internally and externally. The customers continuously ask Paul for his advice. And then last but not least, Laura Mullins. Laura, how long have you been with GENEA? And then prior to that, obviously, maybe give some background on Moylan Energy Management.
Well, I've been with GENEA now for a year and a half, just a little over, right around a year and a half, when GENEA acquired Moylan Energy Management. And prior to that, I was the CEO and president of Moylan Energy Management. Had that company for over 20 years. And prior to that, handled the tenant utility resale division for Moylan Engineering Associates. So I've got like 40 years of experience with utility resale.
Wonderful, thank you. Thanks, Laura. Yeah, it's been, last year we had the opportunity to meet Laura, acquire the Moylan Energy Management business in Michigan, and bring them part of the GENEA family. Laura has a wonderful reputation in the marketplace, a wonderful team in place, and we're really excited to have brought everybody into the GENEA family. So once again, I'm Robert Vail, Vice President of Sales here at GENEA. I've been with the company now for 8 years, and so I'll just kind of be guiding here the conversation as we move forward. So, so when you look at submeters, one of the common questions we have is why should you even put a meter in place? And a reason for that is it's a good way to get general information on the overall utility usage. How is energy being consumed in the building? When you have detailed information at the tenant level and the pieces of equipment they're using, it allows you to really understand where are excessive amounts of energy being used, where should changes be made, do you have broken equipment, do you have toilets that are leaking. It really gets a better understanding of what's happening in the building, especially when you get the larger buildings. You want to really understand, how can I allocate cost and recoup these costs from tenants. So it's really a much better way to get much more granular in an office building or any type of building really, instead of just having one main meter. And prior to submeters being implemented in buildings, the way that meter billing was done, or billing was done, was essentially through an allocation based upon a pro-rata share. And the problem with that is it wasn't exactly fair to tenants who didn't consume as much energy. So if we look at this kind of example here, and we made the numbers really simple just for example's sake. So say you have a 100,000 square foot building, and the main meter utility bill is about $20,000. If we did a pro rata share based upon the tenant's square footage of what they occupy, tenant A would occupies about 46,000 square feet, would consume 46% of the utility bill. Tenant B, 35,000 square foot tenant, would be charged 35% of the bill. And then tenant C, 19,000 square feet, would have 19%. Now, if you look at it just from this view, maybe that is fair. But when we dig a little bit deeper and understand who are the tenants, you get a different story. So if your largest tenant in the building is GSA, we know that most government entities are out of the door at 5 o'clock. They don't work late. They may not have servers on site because everything's done remotely, and sometimes they're just paper pushers. They're spending they're not consuming as much energy. Same thing with the consultants. You may have 9 to 5 consultants who are only in the office, and then you have a 24/7 tech company that has employees there every single day. They've got racks and racks of servers. Where they're consuming excessive amount of energy. Now, obviously, I know today's world, nobody's at the buildings, but in normal situations, these tech companies are really there quite a bit. And they're consuming excessive amount of energy. So for a tech company to only pay 19% of the overall utility is really not fair to the GSA and to the consultants. And so that's why you submeter, is to really have the tenants pay their fair share of what they're using. And obviously, we're going to go deeper into submetering and why, but I wanted to give just a brief example of why do submeter. And what's a practical use of it, right? It measures tenant energy use, and it can potentially change behavior. When people are realizing how much energy they're consuming, what their bills really look like, it might actually change behavior. So maybe they're not working as late, or maybe they understand, okay, do we need to have these racks here in the place, or do we move everything to the cloud so we're not consuming as much energy? It also gives you some real-time equipment monitoring, so you can actually track the equipment, the energy consumption for that equipment, so you understand that your equipment being run efficiently, or there are issues with it, and it really identifies any spikes that may happen within the building. So, and with that, the big thing we want to get to next is, okay, let's look at the types of submeters that are out there, and how do you purchase them, how do you install them? So with that, I'm going to ask Brian Hain to go ahead and jump in here and take over. So Brian, why don't you go jump in and start?
Hey, thanks, Rob. So the first question we get after you've decided that we do want a submeter is, what can we meter? What's available to us? So pretty much the norm is electrical, water, gas, and BTUs, hot water or chilled water. But there's meters out there that can measure just about anything. So if you're in the downtown LA area and you've got steam from the central plant, you can meter that as well. And as you can see, there are a variety of different meters for different mediums. These can be anything from a simple analog meter, such as a regular water meter, that can have a pulse on it. It can have an encoder on it, and we can have fully communicate into smart meters. So there's a wide range of meters there. So let's decide on what you want to meter first. The second thing that we need to look at on the next slide is, what type of meter are we going to put in? Different areas of the country tend to like the socket type meters. As you can see here, the Itron, it's a very common socket meter, seen all over the country. It's really good if you just have a single set of circuits that you want to meter, and you have space in your electrical rooms, because the socket meter and the panel it fits into are generally a little larger than the CT style meters. The socket meter is generally an inline meter as well. So if you have to change it out or remove it, then you will disrupt supply to the tenant. So CT meters, as shown here, There's a whole bunch of them. Dent, Leverton, Eamon Demon. I can go on forever. They're a fairly cheap meter. CTs are widely available, and you can install them without doing shutdowns, as long as you're observing all the safety rules, of course. So it's sort of horses for courses on this one, as you pick what you want, what you think suits your building best. The second thing to look at is brand loyalty. People always say to me, hey, Brian, what do you think to Dent? Hey, Brian, what do you think to Eamon Demon? I've got lots of opinions. I'm not going to share them right here, but if you want to give me a call, I'll share them with you. You know what? If you have a Dent meter, it's great. Use it. If you've got an Eamon Demon, use it. There's not a lot of difference. They all do the same sort of thing. It's just some of the functionality, the extras that you get. Building standards. So let's think about this. If you're going to install 50 meters in your building, you really want to pick a single brand, a single model. Don't be swapping out different brands, different models. It means you've got to have all of those different manuals for those meters. If one goes wrong and you need to swap it out, then you've got to find that particular brand. So yeah, stick with the brand, stick with the model, and move forward with that. The next thing to think about is unit of measure. And people say, why unit of measure, Brian? Well, when you buy things like water meters or BTU meters, they have options. Do you want it in gallons, in cubic feet? Do you want it in BTUs? Do you want it in tons? You'd be quite surprised how often somebody will read a meter and they'll read the number on the meter, but not the unit of measure. And all of a sudden, somebody swapped out a water meter head, and instead of it being in gallons, it's now in cubic feet. And we can't work out why the consumption rate has changed. So stick to the same thing. Not a lot of reason to change unless you really have to. Sometimes there is a reason to change. A brand may not offer a solution that you want. If you're trying to measure 10 sets of three-phase circuits in a single electrical room, putting in 10 itrons, it's going to take up a lot of space and financially probably doesn't make a lot of sense. You might be better off at looking at one of the multi-circuit meters like the Dent, the Triactor, the Leverton, and condense that all into one single box with multiple CTs. So it doesn't really matter. The big thing to think about here is make sure it's installed correctly. So on the next slide, it's like, okay, how do we get these installed and what do we pick? Systems integration. You've got these meters all over the building. How do we read them? Well, get them back into your automation system, your BAS system, your EMS system, whatever you've got. That's always the first option. Also look at how reliable are they? How do I get a new one? Is it going to take me 6 months to get a replacement if one fails? What's parts availability? Does it need to be periodically calibrated? And is there a company locally that can do that calibration for you? These are all good things to think about and good things to ask the metering vendor when you're looking at buying meters. The last thing to look at when picking meters is technical support. What happens if you have a question? What happens if something doesn't make sense? You can call the little tiny company who you have to wait for, the guy when he comes back from vacation, or you end up talking to a call center and you're looking at a 20-year-old product and the guy you're talking to has only been there for 3 months and he's the most experienced guy in the call center. So another thing, and this is opinion based. So on this slide, we just said 20-year-old meters, they exist. There's hundreds of them out there. How long do they last? Why should we change them? So, let's keep up with technology. There's some great meters out here. This Eamon Demon is 20 years old. It still works. It displays kWh. That's what we asked it to do. But it doesn't do an awful lot else. So if you want to add technology, add communications, maybe do some M&V, that sort of thing, then you're going to need to change it out. So you need to look at that. You also need to look at meters wear out. We all know electronics fails, and hey, really, this meter's 20 years old. It should be calibrated. We'll probably find that it's not as accurate as we thought it was. And the last thing that we hear all the time is, I had this meter in my stock room. I'm going to reuse it over here for this tenant. You know what? It sounds good, but meters are so cheap these days. Why risk it? We've seen too many times where somebody has a meter that had one set of CTs on it, and when they move it to the new place, they put two sets of CTs on it. So they change the multiplier, as you see in this picture here. And then it gets moved somewhere else, or somebody can't remember why they did something, and all of a sudden we're not sure whether it's reading right or not. Is it the right multiplier? Does it have the right number of CTs on it? So say, use newer meters, you get all the advantages of the technology, the accuracy and everything else, and say, they're dirt cheap. They're probably cheaper than what you paid 20 years ago for it. Okay, so again, use a licensed contractor, use somebody who knows what they're doing to plug these meters in, to get them connected. So once you have your meters in place, the next thing to do is to look at how we're going to collect this data, which there are numerous ways of doing it. There is no one simple solution. Most of the modern meters will have some form of output, whether it be a pulse output, an encoder output, or a full-blown comms interface. BACnet, Modbus, they're all very common. Pick a meter that matches the system you want to use for your EMS system, or there are some other options. The last few jobs that we've done, we've used the Tahama wireless product. That's really great. Leviton have a great EMH data collector that can be hooked up to Modbus meters and to Modbus pulse counters. So we can mix and match all of these technologies to give us a single result. There's also a couple of newcomers. The AccuEnergy RS485 wireless stuff is really cool. So there is no real easy answer. The only thing I'd say to you is, if you've got a metering situation and you want to find a solution for it, give me a call. We can talk through what you've got, what we can do, and who to go to buy the product and get it installed. Other than that, you come to us for the reading.
Hey, Brian. Some of the questions we get all the time from customers is, if I wanted to put in, say, a Tahama system, how long does it take to get the hardware, get it installed, and then make it so that GENEA can actually read those meters and collect the data?
Good question. So, depending on the manufacturer, because they do vary greatly, unfortunately, you use the example of Tahama. Tahama, if I place an order today, I can probably have it in about a week to 10 days on site. The installation and setup is very, very simple. And I have contacts that can help out with that. But that's, depending on the number of meters, a day should get you 30 or 40 meters, no problem at all, assuming the meter's already there. The setup is fairly self-explanatory. Yeah, so then you just send us the information. So from start to finish, assuming the installation's not a big deal, a couple of weeks, no more than that.
Okay. And then the other question we get a lot is, if say somebody takes over a building and they've decided they want to go ahead and swap out their meters and put in new, either new dent meters or obvious meters or Leviton. What's kind of a cost expectation for buying meters and installation of those meters?
Very, very wide range. Depending on the exact brand you go for and the local labor rates, it can vary quite a bit. A typical Eman Demon meter is about $1,000, 1,500 to $2,000 installed. A dent meter is somewhat cheaper than that, but it depends on the size of the CTs, any other options you may pick with the Eman Demons, and let's say local labor rate is the biggest one. Do you have to do a complete shutdown, et cetera, et cetera. But you should be able to get a single three-phase meter installed for 1,500 to $2,000 normally.
Okay. And then, I'm assuming, GENEA'S got relationships all over the country. So since we do, provide this service, we can probably help facilitate some of those introductions as well.
Yeah, we've got all kinds of people that we talk to, and I can help out with putting people in touch with installers and suppliers, et cetera, for this different equipment.
Okay, wonderful. And then one last thing, if somebody chose not to do a data collector, whether it be the Leviton or anything we see here, and they wanted to send it back to the building automation system, who should be involved with that, and what does it usually take, and what does it take for us to be able to read those particular meters?
So connecting to the automation system is totally dependent on the type of meter. For the Southern California market, there's a lot of Eman Demons. They have pulse outputs on them, and all that's required is that pulse output be wired back to an input of the EMS system, and then that point exposed to us. We have a device that goes on site that communicates with most major EMS manufacturers, and we can read points directly off the EMS system. So as long as that point exists in the EMS system, we can see it. So that is totally dependent, unfortunately, on the options that exist on the meter.
Okay, wonderful. And then we have a question in the chat from Braden Flood. You mentioned that once you find a brand, you recommend staying with that. What happens if the lead time on those meters has become increasingly long? Does that warrant looking into a different brand or model?
Yes. I probably know the brand you're talking about, and there are many other reasons to swap away from that brand other than lead time. But yes, lead time is definitely a good reason. If you have Eman Demon Series 1000s in your building and you're trying to replace them and you can't get them, there are many other options. The Leviton series of meters, the Dent PS series of meters, they're all very, very good and readily available. I can put you in contact with people that can get you Leviton meters and Dent meters on site by Monday, if you really need them. But yeah, that's definitely a good reason to move away from a brand if you're having trouble getting either parts or service.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Brian. Once again, a reminder to the audience: if you have any questions, please feel free to either throw it into the Q&A or the chat. We'll try and take any questions we can live. So we appreciate that. Well, thank you much, Brian. Thanks for your time, and I think we'll go ahead and have Paul jump in. Hey, Paul, are you unmuted?
I am unmuted. Hello, everyone.
All right. Hello, everyone. All right, Paul. We're going to go ahead and have Paul go through some of the billing nuances and talk about some of the things that we see in the marketplace. So, Paul, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Thanks for Brian. So just one of the things that our main focus of our metering team is to provide accurate and timely billing. We built our product and processes to address some of these commonly seen industry struggles when billing back utilities. Some of these struggles revolve around passed down information, misconnected information, mixed environments. So one of the things about mixed environments is having different submeters, having different spreadsheets, not really having the ability to use one product to store, bill, and collect all that data. Makes it tougher for the different people to process information. Also, some of the issues we see come down to billing. So when buildings are set up without fully metering every piece of equipment, there often comes complexities that need to be worked through in order to bill back utilities, whether or not that's using pro-rata shares, using split costs and rates and all of that. So some of those nuances, without having a deeper understanding, become tougher to deal with. And then fragmented processes. So when there's multiple moving pieces from engineering to accounting to property management, there's always that potential for misinformation crossing. One of the things that you'll see in the middle of the page is actually a spreadsheet and read sheet that was sent to us from one of our customers that made it difficult for accounting to read what engineering was writing. Oftentimes there'll be questions that come across, and without having the ability to kind of use the information that's given to you, it makes it tougher to create that process and streamline everything. And then an audit trail. So tenants often ask questions, whether it's why is my usage higher, why are my costs higher, or simply just to confirm a reading for a month. Without having the ability to provide a detailed backup is often difficult and sometimes even unavailable. So some of those additional issues can be helped and solved. Next page, Rob, thank you. So billing for meter usage. I'm sure many of you guys are familiar with billing at a very base case. So when you think about a base case, you're taking a beginning read and an ending read for a meter and billing the usage in between that, and then applying a at cost blended rate. So an at cost blended rate really depends on the market that you're in as well. But when you simplify it all the way down to the base, it is taking the total utility costs, dividing the total utility consumption, and that gives you a blended rate. That includes fees, taxes, everything that you would be paying for from your own building, and applying that to the metered usage. Oftentimes you can actually run into more advanced cases. So this can be either manually read meters, automatically read meters, a combination of both, where you're having to take a pro rata share, you're splitting meters between a couple different tenants, you're billing back for CAM. Also when you have to work with virtual calculations. So that's when you're allocating across different tenants, different processes in your buildings, as well as utilizing meters to allocate costs per unit of measure provided. So examples of that are if you're trying to understand what the cost for chilled water is, hot water, airflow, are some of those examples. Also, if you're trying to build time of use. So collecting enough meter data at a granularity to be able to bill at the time of use, bill with demand, bill with different rates. It can be complex and tough to do. Also tiered billing. So that handles meters that are charged one rate for a certain amount of usage and another rate if it exceeds that amount. And then the last item is utility resale. So that's specific to certain markets, and we're going to touch on that a little bit later in this presentation, but just another example of what can be an advanced case of billing for a submeter. So one of the things that we do in our process for not only our prospects, but also every single one of our customers is run through a full audit of what's been billed historically, what the processes are historically, and that way we get a better understanding of what the complexities are, what the difficulties are, as well as to understand if something potentially was misbilled in the past. We will ask for things such as your past invoices, billing spreadsheets, pictures of meters, and read sheets completed by either your building team or third-party vendors. And we take a deeper look at that by looking at the trends, cost per square footage, consumption calculations, linked formulas, utility bills and rates, to just double check to make sure things are billed accurately and even point out things that might not be. Some of the often mistakes that we're seeing come down to some pretty simple items that without all the information, you're not necessarily going to be able to see it. and some of those mistakes have to do with multipliers. So a multiplier is basically what you see in that first picture up there at the top, and it shows BTU times 1,000. If you're not seeing the meter, you don't necessarily know that you're supposed to multiply that read by 1,000. In the spreadsheet that we had received from a customer, they're actually multiplying that read by 100, which caused them to bill roughly about $50 a month. When you actually multiply it by 1,000, it comes out to closer to 500. So there's issues with either underbilling or overbilling if that multiplier ends up being incorrect. Some of the other things that we see are also rate issues. So depending on the market and the utility provider, they're typically going to be the ones that set those rates. They often change month over month. And if you're not keeping up with those rate structures and those changes in rates, you could potentially be misbilling based on the rate methods. Also, another common mistake is conversions. So a conversion comes down to changing a unit of measure from one unit to another. And that's one of those standardized conversions. So an example is changing gallons to cubic feet. Those meters for water are often either read in cubic feet or gallons, and depending on how you're billing that, if you're not converting it correctly and applying a rate for the other unit of measure, you're going to be misbilling. So things like that often pop up. Also capturing a rollover. So every meter has a finite amount of values it can display. So when it reaches that max value, it'll roll over and start from 0. If you have in your spreadsheet, it adds the current read or subtracts the negative or the last read, you're going to get a negative value or potentially a lower value than should be billed. So there are some errors that could potentially happen when you're using a spreadsheet to try and calculate things that are constantly moving without having that set in there, and could potentially cause misbilling. And a big issue that we constantly see is mistyped reads, or like you saw on the last sheet, if you can't read that, the reads that are sent from one party to the next, and someone's now having to transpose that read from a piece of paper into this Excel or whatever system they're using. If you mistype that read, it causes for a potential of misbilling. So a couple examples that we have here on the right is a dial meter. These are probably one of the most difficult meters to read. The team on our side has been trained very much by Brian and his expertise on how to read these meters, but month over month, it's one of the most common meters that we see that gets misread. You might think about it as, okay, if we read it this value this month, next month we'll offset that. That doesn't always happen. So the Excel or the picture that you'll see there right next to it of the reads and the dates, the highlighted one in red, that's actually from a billed spreadsheet. So on 8/18, that read was typed in as 1594078. More than likely, it should have been 1494. And it was actually billed to that amount. The next month, it would have been a negative value, but it was zeroed out. As you can see through that trend, it doesn't actually get to 1594 until about a year later. So when you think about that, you build a meter past the point of a year later's worth of usage in 1 month. And then our GENEA'S standards. So our team's overall goal is really to provide a solution to tie together your overall process, but also to simplify it in a way that saves time, questions, and headaches. The big thing that we like to be able to provide is that audit trail. So anytime a question comes up about a read, a calculation, a rate, any of those normal questions that a customer or a tenant might ask, we have the ability to provide that to you. Whether it's a rate calculation backup, how we got to our rate, where we got it from, showing the entire formula, as well as timestamp pictures of those meters. That way you can say definitively, this is how we got to this number and this is why it is. Another thing is meeting deadlines. So when we're working on providing those billings, we know that we need all the reads, we know that we need the utility bills. And so we have within our system a notification that allows us to let you know if any of those are missing, so that we're not missing any of accounting's deadlines, any of engineering's deadlines. And that way it's one less thing for you guys to worry about. And then once we receive all of the information we need, typically what we'll ask for is about a 24 to 48 hour turnaround for billing. Most of the time we get it quicker, but that's just a typical cadence of what we're doing. And then the last thing really is the accounting integrations. So we've been able to effectively work with just about every accounting system in the industry, and are able to provide customized accounting files upon completed billing. So it really allows you guys to focus on the things that you want to focus on, and takes one less headache off of the entire team as a whole.
Cool. Thank you, Paul. Couple of questions for you before we move on to Laura. From the time that a GENEA salesperson brings in a new customer to kind of taking them live, or you go through the audit process and get everything squared away, like how long is that process?
That all really depends as well as how quickly that team wants to send us over the information. We've done implementations as quick as 7 days, 30 days, and it's really just that information crossover from the team and how responsive they are with getting the information necessary, as well as just putting it into our system and doing that audit. So we've really fine-tuned our process to make that a very quick and seamless process.
What's some of the ideal information that you should be provided? Is it just spreadsheets? Is it pictures of the meters? What helps you do the job faster and provide the most accurate billing information to our customers?
The best thing that we'll typically ask for is if you're using a billing spreadsheet, send that over to us. We can go in there and dissect it, check formulas as well. If you have invoices that you've sent to your customers in the past, we can actually format our invoices to look similar, as well as it gives us the ability to use those tenant names, their addresses, all the information that's pertinent to the building and the tenant, and get that into our system, and then utility bills that apply to those same periods. And that way, basically what we'll do is we'll recreate your last billing period, and cross-check it with the way that we see our system reading it. So pictures obviously help, but if we're utilizing our app, we'll be taking pictures with the app coming up. So it's useful, not completely necessary, but the more information, the better. Send it all to us.
Okay. And should customers generally kind of take their reads the same day as the utility bill comes out? Is there a preference for the team to make it easier and more accurate?
Yeah, and great question. So one of the things that we work on providing is billing that lines up more closely with your utility provider. It's a little bit tough sometimes to coincide with them because they can kind of come out whenever they want, but typically they'll come around the same time of the month. And that's how we try and set our meter read deadlines and time of taking reads.
Okay. And then obviously with the accounting deadlines and integration, so you know, obviously if the utility bill comes in, say the 15th of the month, and the accounting deadline is the 16th, yeah, how do we handle all that to make sure we're hitting the accounting deadlines, and what's our internal process to make sure that all accounting deadlines are met for the customer?
So we have a full team, a full metering team that's their sole focus is to meeting those deadlines. And one of the things that we always try and prioritize is meeting those deadlines. So if something comes in a little bit late, we'll be on top of you guys asking for those bills that we need, for the reads that we need, so that we don't miss those deadlines, and making sure that we get all the information and we're constantly communicating with you. So we have that team in place to make sure that we're hitting those deadlines, and we understand that information comes across multiple realm. So we're working as best we can to get everything.
Okay, cool. And you mentioned accounting integrations. Can you just kind of talk to how you have files for, we have files for Yardi or MRI or Angus? What's that process look like?
Yeah, so when we're implementing buildings, the first few questions that we're going to ask you is, what's your accounting deadline? What's your accounting system that you're using? Do you use accounting files? And then we ask for an example of that accounting file, and we replicate that. So within our system, we can have it line up exactly what you've used in the past. And once we have the example, once we have all the data in our system, we'll actually send out a test file, and that way you can actually test the upload into your system to make sure that it works. So regardless of what accounting software you're using, we've been able to create those files that work for all of them.
Wonderful, cool. Well, thank you very much, Paul. Appreciate you jumping in, walking through it. Once again, if anybody has questions for Paul, feel free to throw them in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll answer those. And or if you need to talk to Paul separately, we can set up a time to meet with him. So, and with that, thanks, Paul. We'll move over to Ms. Laura Mullins, who once again, her company, Moylan Energy Management, was acquired by GENEA in about 1.5 years ago at this point. So love having Laura as part of the company. Laura's going to really focus on kind of understanding utility bills themselves, talk about energy audits and utility resale. So it's very things that she's got a lot of experience on handling in the state of Michigan. And with that, Laura, are you unmuted? Let's make sure you are. Laura, are you able to unmute so we can get you down here? There. Hi, Laura. Hey, Laura. You might have to unmute on your computer screen there, Laura.
Okay, sorry about that. Can everybody hear me now?
There we are. Yes.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be a part of this panel discussion. And what I'm going to be talking about is expanding a little bit on what Paul had talked about regarding the utility meter reading and billing allocation of utilities. And then I'm also going to be addressing the unique area of utility resale, which is allowed in specific states, such as Michigan, New York, and Wisconsin, where the resale of electricity is allowed. Whether we're talking about utility resale or utility allocation, the utility meter reading and tenant billing touches multiple hands from start to finish. First is the utility company, who supplies the power to the buildings, whether it's electric, gas, or water, and then bills that property for their consumption. Then the facility owner management company receives that bill, pays it, and then there's the tenant, who's the end user of those utilities, who ultimately will receive a bill also. Then last but not least is the vendor, who's handling this process for the property owner or management company, and they're handling the meter readings and the billings of the facilities. The first hand to touch it is the utility company. They're supplying the building with the utilities, be it water, gas, or electric. They're utilizing their meters on the building itself, applying their rates, and then billing the building. The building is then receiving that bill and paying it, and then setting it up for the resale process. It's always an important and good idea for the property management team to have a concept of those utility rates and rate structures. More importantly, it's important for them to understand the parts of that utility bill and how it's going to impact their bottom line. Nationally, the combined utility expense for commercial property represents approximately 1/3 of the building's total operating expenses, with electricity representing about 80% of that pot. So let's discuss some of the components on your utility bill. First and foremost, are you receiving an actual or estimated bill? This is typically clearly indicated right after your meter reading on your bill with either an A or an E. A representing an actual read, E representing an estimated read. What are your units of measurement, as Brian has talked about regarding meters? If you're being billed for electrical usage, you're going to be billed on kilowatt hours, kWh. Most likely, if you're being billed for your property, you're also being billed on a demand component, which is referred to as kW. And then are you being billed for, if you're being billed for gas, are you being billed in cubic feet or therms or BTUs? And is those units in 100 cubic feet, which is a CCF, or 1,000 cubic feet, which is an MCF? And your water billings, like Paul and Brian have both discussed, are they in gallons or are they in cubic feet? They can be one or the other. Is your building based on a tiered rate where you have on-peak and off-peak usage charges, or are they at block times to where you're being billed for a set amount of usage, no matter whether you hit that peak, you hit that usage or not? And then are you being billed for demand components, single high demand, or as well as maximum demands from your prior summer? And are there penalties associated with your utility bill? Could you be being billed a penalty for your power factor or even your ratchet demand? And last but not least, what type of taxes are associated with your bill? By getting a general understanding of how your bill is made up from your utility company, you can better understand how your tenant's utility load is impacting your utility costs, current and future use. We had a property management team one time that they were representing a large empty box store that had been empty for approximately 2 years. The leasing agent had called them and said they wanted to show the space to a tenant, potential tenant. It was middle of August, 90-degree weather. He wanted all the air conditioning units turned on so that he could walk the potential future tenant through in a cool building. Property manager knew enough about the rates that he knew it was going to have some type of impact on it, the bottom line. So he contacted us, we ran some numbers, told him by running the chillers and cooling that building down, it would cost them an additional $10,000 for that particular month. Not only that, but there were going to be future costs associated with running those chillers for 1 day, which would have amounted to approximately $50,000 of electrical usage just for cooling that property down for 1 day. Needless to say, the property manager called the leasing agent and said, bring a fan. Also, if you're in a state that allows for the electrical resale, your utility bills can let you know what type of margins you have so that you can budget for that. And then taxes. What type of taxes are you being billed on your bills? And if you have a large tax exempt tenant, is the taxes that you're being billed on your main utility bill appropriate because of the volume of usage that tenant's using? And is your property on the best rate? That's important to know. And when you have an understanding of your rate structure, you'll have more likely a better understanding of what other rates are available for you. All of these things too can be gone over with you with your utility billing vendor. The next slide addresses utility billings and getting started. Is your property a good candidate for utility billings? Are any of your tenants possibly already being directly billed by the utility company for one or more of their utilities? Is perhaps the gas already submetered and directly billed? and then you're responsible for the electric and water allocation. And then talking of the allocation, are you billing your tenants back on a utility allocation, like Paul has discussed? Or are you in a state that allows for resale, and are you reselling your property, reselling your utilities? And does your property already have the submeters installed and ready to go? And then also selecting the best utility billing vendor. Next slide. Now I'm going to touch on utility resale. These are some of the responsibilities of the utility reseller. Utility resale is very similar to the same process that Paul and I have discussed in terms of utility allocation. The main utility bill comes in from the local utility, the property submeters the tenants, and bills the tenants back for their usage based on their submeters. The difference is the rate. The rate that the building is being billed at versus the rate that the tenants are being billed at. In most cases, in a resale environment, the building is being billed at what is referred to as a primary rate, where the tenants are being billed back at a secondary rate. With a primary rate, the building owns its own transformer, which can receive the power from the utility company at a much higher voltage level. The building's transformer steps that power down into a usable voltage level for the tenant's consumption. The building owns the transformer and is responsible for all the costs and maintenance of that transformer and its equipment. But because the building's receiving that power at a higher voltage level, they're eligible for a primary rate from the utility company. So the utility company has a set primary rate, and in most cases, that's going to be substantially lower than the secondary rates. And the secondary rates are available to the customers without their transformers, customers that need to receive their power in a more usable voltage level. Because the building is receiving it at a lower rate than what they're reselling it at, they're able to make a profit on the resale of their electricity. In resale states such as Michigan, this is allowed, where they can make the profit on the resale. However, the reseller must follow certain rules and regulations by the local utilities. In the Michigan market, that would be DTE and Consumers Energy, and they have to follow their rules and regulations as well as those of the Michigan Public Service Commission. Listed on this slide are a few of those samples. There's a resale agreement that should be signed with the utility company allowing for the resale of electricity. You need to submeter your buildings, your tenants, and bill them at the applicable rate. Certify the meters like Brian has talked about. That's with the resale agreement, this is actually part of the process and rules and regulations, as well as having resale audits conducted. And last but not least is the tax portion, where you're allowed to make profit on the resale of electricity. You're not allowed to make a profit on the tax portion. So if your utility bill for your electric is at 8 cents a kilowatt hour and you're reselling it at 10.5, you need to calculate that differential on the revenue that you're receiving and submit those additional tax dollars to the state. Next slide.
Hey, Laura, before we do that, we got a question. Braden Flood wanted to know, would we reach out to our utility vendor to find out if we own the transformer within the building, or is it assumed that with it being in the building, it is owned?
In most cases, you can reach out to your utility company, but if the meter, the utility meter from the main utility company is before the transformer, then most cases you own that transformer. If it's after the transformer, then in most cases the utility owns that transformer. But you can definitely reach out to your local utility. They'll be able to let you know.
Cool, thank you very much. All right, I'm gonna change the slides for you.
Okay, this slide addresses, has information in both regarding utility allocation and utility resale. So you're submetering your tenant's loads. It's important to submeter your billable, non-billable, and vacant spaces. Your non-billable would be those tenants that per their lease language does not allow for additional utility costs to be billed back to them. But you might ask, well, why should you submeter your vacant areas and non-billable tenants? Well, by metering this, it gives you the data to be able to calculate your common area accurately. It gives you your full tenant occupied and unoccupied loads. Not only does it help you reflect your common area calculations more accurately, it can also help save money. We've come across cases where we've seen a vacant meter jump up in usage. We contact the property management company and we find out that a leasing agent has shown the space and left all the lights on. Or in some cases, we see that there's an increase in usage on both the lighting and receptacle meter, contact the property management company and discover that a tenant had moved in that we hadn't received that information on. So by submetering all of your spaces, it gives you much more valuable information as a whole. And meter location, when you're installing your meters, is an important aspect. Lots of times we'll go in for water meter readings and we've discovered that they're 10 to 12 feet up in the ceiling and not accessible, to where they have to then, if it's not a remote read, they have to install a remote read down so where the meter can be read manually. And accessible areas, it's important to install the meters in accessible locations. Even if your meters are being read remotely, if you need to service the meters for any reasons, they need to be accessible. And outdoor or indoor meter locations. If you're installing any meters outdoors, you need to make sure that they're outdoor rated meters. And even at that, depending on your location, if you're in California, it shouldn't be a problem. But if you're in Texas or Michigan, where we have extreme weather conditions, you might need to take that into consideration. We had a property that installed the electrical meters on the outside of the building on a retail space. They were outdoor rated meters, but then all the meters that were on the south side of the property, after a year and a half, started to fail. And they ultimately ended up replacing all of them due to the weather conditions impact on them. And then tenant utility information. It's besides your normal everyday information, like your building address, mailing address, tenant ID information, remittance address. It's always nice to have square footage information on the tenant, as well as the type of tenant that it is. That gives us an idea as your vendor as to whether or not the usage being picked up on the meter is what's expected. Paul kind of touched base on this in terms of it's just an overview of looking at it to see if the billings are making sense. After all, a data center is going to use much more electricity than a general office use tenant would, or even a sales office. And then last but not least is common area usage, also known as CAM. This depending on your allocations. If you're doing utility allocation, this can be calculated based on either dollars or unit of measurement. And your CAM is backing out from your main utility bill what all of your tenants' spaces are using, including your non-built-in vacancies, and giving you the delta in terms of what is your common area, your lobbies, your parking lot lighting lights using. In a case of utility allocation, this can be done by either the dollar amount or the unit of measurement. But if you're in an area where they're doing resale, it's very important that you use unit of measurement to calculate your common area. If you're using the dollar methodology, you're taking the dollars that you're receiving from your utility, which is at a lower rate, and then backing out the dollars you're billing back to your tenants, which are at a higher rate, and to come up with your CAM. If you're doing it in that method, you're inadvertently crediting back your tenants through the CAM for your resale profit. So if you're doing utility resale, it's important to use unit of measurements for CAM. If it's utility allocation, you could do either or by dollar amount or unit of measurement. And that about wraps up my portion.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Laura. I really appreciate that. Your expertise is just, amazing. So for anybody who is in either a state where you can actually do utility resale, such as Michigan, Wisconsin, New York, and you want to learn more about that, please feel free to reach out to Laura or anybody in our Michigan office. They're all experts in doing this and helping you get set up. And of course, we've got a wonderful team there who would love to chat with you as well. We're going over a little over time, Laura, so I'm going to go ahead and just keep on going here, and we'll wrap it up. But thank you again to Laura, to Paul, and to Brian for everything you guys do. You make us look really good, and our customers love you for it. So I'll go ahead and start the wrap-up process here for the few people who are on. So what I'll walk through just briefly is just some of the lessons learned. As it's some great information from our three panelists, but one of the things you look at is, it's submeter is important, right? You need to be able to go through and analyze exactly what is happening at the building, make sure you're recouping all your energy costs, and that you're billing back appropriately for your tenants. You want to understand what you're metering and pick the appropriate meter. As Brian talked to, there's a lot of things you can measure, but are you doing it accurately? Do you have the right meter in place? If your meter is outdoors, you have a meter that can absorb the weather. So you got to really understand what you're doing in terms of how you pick the meter. Not all things are equal. Your submeter billing spreadsheets, if you've inherited a submeter billing spreadsheet because you took over a building, there's a chance that there's an error in it. We see this all the time where they're passed down through multiple ownerships, property management companies. Everybody tries to fix it with formulas, and there's a chance you're billing incorrectly if you're using a spreadsheet, which is one of the reasons that you want to move to a software solution. You got to understand your utility rates and your rate structures. So to make sure that you're being billed the appropriate amount from the utility company. Not to say that the government entities and utility companies make errors, but it's always a good idea to double check that to make sure that what you're contracted for is what you're actually being billed for. And one of the big last key components of everything is communication is the key success. And that's not only from just, from a vendor perspective, it's from everybody involved when it comes to submetering and billing back. So, one of the things that we do at GENEA is we work directly with property managers, engineers, the accounting folks, because ultimately this has to get billed back. And we want to even work with the utility companies. So, the benefits and things that people have loved about our company is we'll help spearhead all those conversations to ensure that the communication, everybody understands what's happening and that all the communication is very clear and open for the entire group. It's a very big thing we do here at GENEA. The last thing I'm going to walk through is just obviously our solution. So we think we have the best solution in the marketplace when it comes to reading and billing for meters. Obviously, we have our in-house experts to help you figure out what meters you should buy, how do you get them networked. Then you want to take that data and do something with it, and that's really where we come in. So our service and our company can handle both your networked and your non-networked meters. We can monitor those meters for you 24/7. We'll create invoice statements for you that have been audited, that have audit trails, meaning they've got pictures associated with the meters that is fully backed up. So once again, you get out of the spreadsheet business, you get out of doing it yourself, and you rely upon a third-party company like ours. And we provide a full audit trail. For those meters that are networked, if you've got meters that are networked back to your building automation system or to any of the devices that Brian mentioned, whether it be a Tahama or Obvious or an Eamon Demon IDR, we can connect to that through our device that you see here on the screen, and that allows us to read those meters like essentially a point in the automation system. And what it does is it allows us to read meters in 15 hourly, daily intervals. We can monitor them 24/7 for you, and we'll alert you if a meter goes offline mid-month. So you have an opportunity to go out, check the meter, fix the meter, and we'll alert you to any anomalies. Of course, then from there, we take all the billings. The other big thing is for those of you who have manual meters, which is a lot of the meters at place, we bring a software solution to help streamline the collection process. So we actually built an application for a smartphone, iPhone or Android, where you download all the meter information. We send out asset tag stickers with QR codes on them that gets put right on the face of the meters, like you see here in the image. Once the meter reader goes out to the site, they can use our app, they scan the QR code, it pulls up the meter, and they simply type in the consumption value. The other thing that happens is as soon as you hit that green scan button, it actually takes a picture of your meter. So now you have a time-stamped photo of the meter read. So if a tenant ever questions your bill, you actually have an audit trail. You can show them, here's the picture, and here's what the read was at the time of collection. We also upload historical reads within the app. So this way, at the time of collection, it gives you real-time verification. If last month's meter is 1,000 and this time you're trying to type in 800, it's going to flag it as a bad read because meters roll over, they don't go backwards. Once the read is with an expected value based upon historical consumption, it changes to a green light. So a very simple red light, green light system, but it really helps at the time of collection to make sure you're typing in the right numbers and you get in the right consumption value. From there, all the data uploads into the cloud. So we take all the reads, all the images, they move into the cloud. So even if you're in the basement of the building where you don't have a signal for the cell phone, that's fine. It caches to the phone, and once you have data, everything pushes into the cloud. And then at the end of the month, we generate the tenant invoice statements for you. Once you provide the utility bill, we'll either apply a blended rate or like in the state of Michigan, we'll apply all the rates plus taxes and any additional fees. Same thing with New York City. And we'll generate all those invoice statements for you, provide them to you in a nice package that you can then add to the back of your rent statements when you bill back to those tenants. And then we'll go ahead and provide that accounting file for you as well. So once again, you can push that into the accounting software or into your work order system. But it's a full-fledged solution from beginning to end to handle all the metering scenarios that you may have in the building. So just, one of the benefits, one is we work with any existing meters, both networked or manual. We monitor all those networked meters for you, so we alert you if something's off. We provide all the invoice generation for you, so you no longer have to do that with a spreadsheet. That goes away, and we handle that for you, and we provide a full audit trail. So from beginning to end, GENEA is here to support you. We're here to advise you as you're trying to figure out what should you put in the building, what type of meters should you buy, how should you get those networked. We're here as a solution provider to give advice and to work with you and to take care of you and of course, your tenants. And with that, I want to say thank you very much to our panelists, Brian, Laura, and Paul. You guys were wonderful. Really appreciate your time. And for the audience, we appreciate your time. We will be sending up a follow-up email with a recording of this webinar. For those of you who have any questions, feel free to reach out to the team. Our contact information is here on the screen. And have a wonderful day. Thank you, everybody. Oh, wait, we have a question coming in. Hey, Michael, in terms of selecting a meter installer, you can reach out to myself, Rob Vale, and I'll connect you with Brian, and we can go ahead and get you in that team. So we'll send you over our contact information afterwards. So, so once again, I want to just thank everybody. Have a wonderful day, and we will all speak soon. Take care.